Ladies and gentlemen, Vladimir Zelensky has returned to the White House. We remember the February 28th little scuba-hub, which ended in Zelensky basically being thrown out of the White House. He's come back. He's in a suit. Trump kind of babied him when he, met him outside again. I'm going to go to that in a second. But we do have the big updates. They talked. There's meetings behind the scenes happening all day. There's many of the different European leaders that have already arrived at the White House, everyone coming together, and then Trump hinting at potentially Zelensky, Trump, and Putin all having a meeting together, potentially in-person meeting. I was thinking maybe towards the end of the week. They're saying it's a trilateral meeting. And so we've got a lot of clips from Trump. You do have Vance and Rubio right next to Trump, and this is really the next step when it comes to a potential peace deal. Zelensky lays out what he wants. He wants some type of security guarantees from the United States, not just the European countries. And there's been rumors, well, maybe that will be given to Ukraine because Trump is so committed to this peace deal. If the United States gets involved to a lesser degree, we would hope, than the European countries in terms of the security assurances given to Ukraine, they need significant guarantees, but I mean, they're really not in a position of strength to negotiate. Of course, you do have the Western European angle, which potentially gives them a little bit more strength, and then the United States somewhere in the middle, and then Russia on the other side. So we'll see what Trump says here.
I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much.
So Trump going to call Putin after the meeting, and then they're potentially going to set up a meeting with all three of them. Zelensky asked what kind of security guarantees he needs from the United States to stop the war. He says everything, including American troops.
What security guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President,
well, I think what he's saying there is, he talks about the Ukrainian army. That's a sticking point. Russia wants Ukraine to be demilitarized, and that's, we'll see what happens in terms of that. If the security guarantees come from the United States, could there be some type of negotiation with Ukraine and with Russia? Because it's very obvious that Russia wants there to be a serious demilitarized situation within Ukraine, and the Ukrainians don't want to do it. I mean, that is a clear difference. We can argue about territory. And Ukraine, or Zelensky now brings up their constitution saying it's illegal for us to give up territory. I mean, what do you mean it's illegal? They've already taken it, right? They've already invaded and they've occupied those areas. So there has to be some type of resolution to stop all of the fighting, or otherwise Russia's just going to continue. Like ceding territory, whether you think it's illegal based on your constitution, I think every country would just have a constitution that says it's illegal to take our land, but they've already taken it. Now, I guess he's saying, well, it's illegal for us to capitulate on that based on our constitution. But again, it's like, if there is a peace deal, it's going to require the acknowledgement of certain land going to Russia. And if it's not acknowledged, then why would Russia stop? So I think that's the key there. But yes, there is, there has been wiggle room now, apparently, to where Trump really wants this to happen. And it's speculation, but there is the thought of, well, I know they've hinted at it, maybe the United States helping mend some type of peace situation within Eastern Europe that would make the Ukrainians feel more comfortable with accepting a peace deal. And to me, the bigger issue is the demilitarization of Ukraine, which the Ukrainians do not want at all, and the Russians say must happen to have a peace deal. So there's going to have to be flexibility on that. And then also the land exchanges, whatever you want to call it, the swaps. It would be the recognition of the Donbass region going over to Russia with other areas that are right now invaded by the Russians. There would be Russian troop withdrawal, and then you would get potentially some type of deal to where Ukraine's like, all right, well, if we're going to get land back, we'll accept it. But they want all their land back, and it's just not going to happen. Trump confirmed again yesterday, and they've said this about 100 times, it's impossible to get Crimea back for Ukraine at this point without major escalation and a war that would be prolonged and potentially made bigger. That's the only way you could potentially get Crimea back at this point. So it's not worth it for the United States, certainly not this administration with how Trump was elected, to go for anything like that. And, you know, we'll see what ends up happening, but like the whole idea with sanctions on Russia, I really don't think it's going to happen at this point. It seems like Trump has no appetite for it. This is Trump making a joke about the idea of, because Zelensky says they can't have elections because there's a war going on, which honestly, to a degree, does make sense. It's like, it's going to be very inaccurate to get an actual tally because it's just, you're talking about a country in the middle of a fight. But it is kind of funny, Trump says, well, maybe we'll just go to war with like Rwanda or somebody in 3 years, and so I can stay in and still be president. So there was that. Trump says it's Joe Biden's war, so he reiterates the same stuff he's been saying. It's an honor to have the president of Ukraine with us. Progress is being... All right, let's see what this is.
It's an honor to have the president of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the president of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being.
And then you've got this.
President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good.
I said to the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed you out.
Maybe yours is much better.
So Zelensky and the reporter that called out Zelensky for not wearing a suit. I mean, Zelensky's in all black. Zelensky showed up at like the guest residence in a t-shirt. It was pretty funny. Imagine he showed up into the White House in a t-shirt. Dude, I at that point, I might have to respect Zelensky if he showed up to the White House in a t-shirt, honestly. Because that would just be, I mean, now he wears a black suit. And then you've got this, and this is just Trump just babying the hell out of Zelensky here.
Best I have.
It's like a son coming downstairs. They're getting ready for church, and the mom's like, "Oh, you look so cute." Like, that's what it's. I mean, dude, Trump does this. It's got to be on purpose. I mean, I know he's a boomer and stuff. Maybe he doesn't. You're babying the poor guy.
The best I have.
Pretty face.
President Trump, so your message to the people of Ukraine as world leaders gathered here today.
We love them. We love them.
Message to the people of Ukraine: we love them. And so there is Trump with Zelensky. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think ideally, a lot of this is behind closed doors. You can only speculate. But there's going to be land swaps. Ukraine potentially is going to get some land back. Russia's going to be able to annex areas, and it's going to be recognized by the Western powers. And that's going to be the compromise. When it comes to the demilitarization, maybe there's a restriction on the Ukrainian army with the assurances from the Western powers, including the United States, on potential security against Russia. In essence, they scale down their military, but they get significant security guarantees with troops, not just from... I mean, this is where it gets... Because there's going to be Republicans that don't like that. If there is U.S. troop involvement to secure Ukraine. And I don't know if that's going to be happening or not. There is going to have to be negotiations on it because that's what Ukraine is going to want. Will they get it? I don't know. And this also comes down to leverage. Are the Ukrainians pressured into doing a deal because they think the current situation is unsustainable? Are the Russians thinking, well, if the potential Trump tariffs come on some of these countries to encourage them to stop doing trade with us, could it be time for us to do a deal? It also depends on the pressure. If the countries are not pressured and they don't get their perfect deal, it's going to be hard to find a solution, an immediate solution to where, right now we're having these talks, and hopefully this doesn't go off the rails, because if it does, we're back almost to square one. We have all these meetings. You get the Putin meeting, you get the Zelensky meeting, there's full dialogue. You need to keep it going. There needs to be some compromises. There can be, you can still, maybe the demilitarization doesn't happen. Maybe it's just a scaled down army with the security guarantees, and then it's the Donbass annexed, but other territories go back to Ukraine. Something along those lines in terms of a compromise is how I see it. Crimea is officially recognized by the West as being part of Russia as well. Obviously, Ukraine would not like that, but they would get territory back potentially. This is what we're talking about. There's give and take. So we'll see what ends up happening in terms of this. And look, they're going to have meetings with all the European leaders. The European leaders are a lot more scared of Russia than we are. They're closer to Russia in terms of proximity, so it's understandable. But let's hope this ends up getting solved. And if there is a meeting like Trump was insinuating at the beginning between the three of them in person, I think you've got to be very encouraged. You've got to be very encouraged. And Putin has said for the longest time, and Trump, he agreed recently, there is no ceasefire. It's just a peace deal. So if this gets done, it's going to be done. I mean, at least for the time being, for a long period of time, we would imagine, because a peace deal has a significantly better chance of at least lasting a decent amount than a 30-day ceasefire. There's no real timeline on it. So, listen, it's going to come down to compromise between both sides and overall pressure. If neither of the sides are pressured enough and they don't get the perfect deal, they don't have to agree. They have to face some form of pressure. And I think Ukraine has the pressure as a byproduct of being a smaller country and the ones being invaded and the ones right now struggling with manpower. So they have their own pressure. What is the degree of that pressure? Well, we don't know fully. We're not totally privy on their situation. With Russia, it would be potentially being shelled off. But I think the Russians know that Trump is bluffing, unfortunately. I just can't see Trump putting in catastrophic sanctions on top of the sanctions that are already against Russia. I mean, the West still does have sanctions against Russia, but the only thing I can think Trump would do is he would really ratchet up tariffs on China and India to try and force them or pressure them to stop taking in Russian oil. But would that even work? I don't know. So if you're Russia, are you even threatened by that is the question. So guys, a little bit of talking, a lot of behind the scenes action. That's normally how these things go when it comes to the peace deal. And then normally the stuff gets broken it comes out in rumors on what they're discussing and kind of the appeasement by each side on certain issues and certain factors. I think the demilitarization is a sticking point that potentially can be solved with a scaled down, army allowed with it for Ukraine to have assembled with significant security and assurance protection from the Western countries and possibly also including the United States. And Trump can potentially kind of swing it and say, well, we have a mineral situation in Ukraine, but that would be something that you're starting to talk about. There has to be a coaxing to get this done, and that would be Trump giving in a little bit to try and formulate this peace deal, because there are a lot of people that wouldn't like that. They wouldn't want any U.S. involvement in Ukraine. So, and Ukraine obviously wants that. They want protection in part from the United States. And this turns almost into, if you're Russia, an even more overbearing NATO situation to a degree if you're talking about all of these NATO troops within Ukraine. So it's almost like, well, does this really solve much? Yeah, sure, you're getting territory in eastern Ukraine that you think already should be yours, and there is a lot of resources within that territory, but is this really solving much if there's a bunch of NATO encroachment now within Ukraine which Ukraine justifies as we need the security protection because of a potential reinvasion after the 2022 invasion. They could reinvade, and so they need the protection there. So, I mean, there's a lot to think about for sure. But either way, guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also, follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.